Give everybody a chance to come on in here. They are coming in. Yeah. All right, giving folks just an opportunity to get in. We'll get started in just about a minute. It's good to see everyone streaming in. Got a wonderful day today. Shouldn't do that. Block part of our background. Right. Okay. Hi, Dia.
Hello, how are you?
Good, I'm good. You're coming to us from home?
Atlanta, yes.
Yeah, nice. Looks gorgeous.
Oh, thank you.
Also look like
easy to set up a frame, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's all you need. It's right there.
Right
That's
in the
why I'm
box.
using a virtual background, because
Even better, even easier. That's right.
That's right. I imagine you're having better weather than we are. We're overcast and messy.
Honestly, it's like stunning. It's A1 weather today. It's gorgeous.
You don't have to rub it in. Oh man. All right. Let me kick this thing off formally. We got several people here with us today. And here we go. Good evening. Thank you for joining us for the next installment of the Thread Speaker Series. My name is Nick Greer. I'm not Sarah Heminger, who's been doing these for a little while. She's out today. I'm the Executive Vice President of Research and Training at Thread. We're very excited to bring you this forum for sharing inspiring ideas from exceptional leaders like Dia about the ways in which equity plays out across a variety of contexts, and to demonstrate the power of building intentional relationships across lines of difference to create a more equitable social fabric. At Thread, we believe that relationships are at the heart of change, whether that's individual growth or systemic shifts or anything in between. By building intentional relationships across lines of difference, Thread believes we can break down the structural barriers that exist and build a society that recognizes the intrinsic value of each human being. With this speaker series, we are shining a light on diverse leaders who are models for how others can drive sustained change through coordinated and consistent interventions in the intrapersonal, interpersonal, institutional, community, and policy domains. I'd encourage anyone who's unfamiliar with or new to Thread, or who wants to develop those skills and build deep connections with others in our city, come join us. We're a wonderful community. You can find us at www.thread.org. Just a few housekeeping things before we begin. I'm coming to you from Johns Hopkins University, and I'm on the Homewood campus. So, come find us if you know. The Thread Speaker Series is an extension of an undergraduate course at Hopkins that I teach in collaboration with Sarah. And we do have some students here with us in the room today. We are glad to offer this series virtually via Zoom to the larger community. If you would like to ask a question, please use the Q&A function on the bottom of our Zoom window. It's really easy to use. It's a really great way to get your questions in, and we'll be sure to give time for those in the end. We hope you will join us each week for additional discussions, and you can view the upcoming speakers and register for additional discussions at thread.events/speakers. Today, we are grateful to be joined by an exceptional business leader and entrepreneur and general badass and just a really good friend to Thread, Dia Sims. Hi, Dia.
Hi, everyone.
Yeah, it is really good to see you. I haven't seen you in a bit.
I know, too long.
Yeah, it's been a minute, but I am ecstatic that we get to do this today, have this little fireside chat with one another, and get to share with the world who you are, as if they don't already know, and learn from you in many different ways. So you feeling good today?
I'm having time of my life, legit. Yes.
That's great. Let's talk about some of that, because I'm looking to find some of that energy. So let's start real simple but big. Tell us your origin story. What are some of the big milestones along your journey to where you're at today at Lobos? Tell us, how'd you get here?
Yeah, I'm happy to. I like that origin story characterization. It sounds fancy. So
It's all Marvel. It's all
I don't know if
Marvel.
it's that exciting. I saw Black Adam last night. I don't know. I'll do my best. But I grew up in Queens, New York, and I do think don't worry, I won't talk for an hour about this. But one interesting piece, interesting piece was I grew up in this neighborhood called East Elmhurst, very close to LaGuardia Airport, if you're familiar with this. Also the same island that the famed prison Rikers Island is on. But the interesting thing was when I was little, relatively little, like maybe 9 or 10, there were some hip hop artists, which you guys might not know, but like Salt and Pepper and Kid and Play.
Whoa. Hold on. Did you just say I might not know?
Not you, but the general group. I know you know, but the general group might be like, what? Moneybag Yo, I don't talk to people I know. So they were literally like catty corner of my backyard. I would see them practicing like their dance moves literally over and over again all day long. Now I was doing whatever my mother told me, getting a tomato, hanging a shirt on the clothing line, right? So I didn't necessarily process that degree because they weren't that famous yet, for one. And I think seeing, like kind of having this front row seat to seeing them then grow to becoming really popular, really famous, then entrepreneurs and owning like the barbershop up in our neighborhood, and somebody invested in a hair salon, and then seeing like this huge movie at the time called House Party, which now is actually coming out again with my current boss, LeBron James, funnily, came out and be in theaters all across the country, and to kind of have a front row seat to see what was this cultural hobby become what is now today a $1 trillion business, I think was the early kind of cementing in, hey, you can do something you really love and is special and unique to your culture. And that if you do it in a respectful and requited way, culture and commerce can actually be complementary bedfellows.
Wow. You got to tell me, like in that period of time, how many inches did Play's afro grow?
Oh my gosh, I would say, if I had to guess, like, I felt like it was like a good 7.5. I mean, it was up there. It was a real
like moment. Straight up.
Yeah. Like totally vertical. Yeah.
Oh, I love it. Wow. All right. So that's the origin story. I love the milestone, especially the hip hop piece. I didn't know. And really appreciate hearing you were like watching Salt and Pepper practice.
Yeah.
Was Spinderella there too?
What's that?
Was Spinderella there too?
No, it used to be 2 people. They went. So, there was a bit of spinning with the Spinderella. So I'm on my business on that. But yeah, there was artists all around. Kwame and a rapper named Rakim was close by, and I just got to see a lot of like music culture come to fruition in real life. I went then to go to Morgan State down in Baltimore, which is when I first got to fall in love with the city. I did a ton of things. I was in a particular program, worked for the Department of Defense out of college, negotiating defense contracts. That was super, like, honestly, I really value that experience because I was part of a brand new program where they were trying to reshape the process of buying things for the Department of Defense. So I worked for what was called Naval Air, Nav Air. And by a country mile, I was way hella younger than anybody in any room. I was like 21. I was given like over $100 million contract to work on, and my boss was gone almost all the time. The only minority, the only woman, and I was working with these really seasoned contractors, mostly out of Meridian, Mississippi, and with big companies like Boeing, and they were definitely like, why is she's not giving me a cup of coffee? I do not know why she's in the room. But it was such a perfect baseline for learning because I was like, well, the only thing I can do to kind of stand up for myself is to just know my stuff, right? So I was like memorizing backwards and forwards the federal acquisition, I don't even know what it's called anymore, regulations, the FAR is what it was called, and it's just as incredibly sexy and as exciting as it sounds.
You say it sounds like a mile a minute.
I know, it's like you cannot go to sleep reading that thing. So I had to learn to just really show up, and I took it really seriously. I was young, but I got all of the training of, you're defending the taxpayer. Like, this is real money. And I still to this day think about everything of like, this is our money, this is our country, we're the democracy. And when I'm meant to be a steward for the taxpayer, I would stand up to our engineers and people who had honestly, like, sometimes 50-year relationships between the contractor side and the defense side. And it taught me a lot about negotiation, because I was actually sent to what was called the Defense Acquisition University. So I had a ton of training on negotiations, which is all the time with my husband, my 9-year-old, back when I was negotiating deals for Puff Daddy, negating deals now for LeBron James. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it comes in handy all the time.
That has been a skill that you have used many times.
Yeah, I know you've been a party. And then also, it just taught me about understanding how to drive impact in a room where you were unexpected. Not necessarily always unwanted, but unexpected can sometimes have the same ROI in terms of your ability to navigate the situation. And it was just a really perfect kind of baseline for that. And then I did a ton of stuff in sales and marketing, pharmaceutical sales, radio sales. And then I ended up working for Puff, Sean Diddy, Brother Love Combs. October 5th, 2005 was my first day with him, starting as his executive assistant. And then I grew to be promoted multiple times and became the first president of Combs Enterprises, like outside of Puff himself running it in the history of the company. And I was with him for about 14 years, and we built a really big business and a bunch of other businesses together. And then I'm doing what I'm doing now, running the tequila for all of you who are 21 up, Lobos 1707, which is doing really well.
I hear it's doing really well. I haven't had it yet. Hint. Yeah.
Oh,
I'm gonna have to find a bottle.
Yes,
so hearing that journey, like as I listen to it, like you got defense contracts in there, you've got marketing, you've got liquor, you've got all the stuff. Negotiations is a big piece of that. It's a piece of it in your home life. It's a piece of it in the real life. But like, are there other through lines like for you, like that like took you through all of those spaces and you were like, I've been building towards this moment? Or has it just been what's up next entrepreneurially?
Yeah, honestly, I don't have like a very seamless story in one particular genre. I studied psychology, and in undergrad, I thought about, at the time, I thought I was going to either go to law school or medical school. Mm-hmm. So when I took the job for the Department of Defense, it was because they would pay for law school and because I would be trained in negotiations. And I thought it was like a good first step to get a little work experience and then go to law school. I instead went on to get my master's degree with a concentration in contract management. But I didn't really have a linear path. There's a great project. It's called the CEO Genome Project. And it's worth looking up because they studied essentially, I want to say like VP to C-suite to look for what type of history and background of people that would eventually lead companies, what they had in common and what were the common traits and common experiences. And one of them was actually non-linear paths. It was like having exposure to a variety of different industries or genres. It kind of forces your brain to be nimble. And if you're potentially double down on a methodology of problem solving versus being so stuck to learning, it's great if you know your industry in and out. But in order to be a flexible thinker and proactive problem solver that's sometimes required in a leadership position, I think that experience in different industries can be useful. And it was a common thread in that study.
It's like the liberal arts path to becoming a CEO. Like you get like you got to explore all the different things with your concentration.
Sort of, yeah.
You can call it anything. So we talk a lot about I know we've talked about it before, but just as a refresher, we talk a lot about the forms of power. There's hidden power, visible power, and invisible power. And one of the forms, invisible power, is the one that like, it's the messages that we receive about our value and what we're capable of doing in the world. And it always strikes me every time I hear your story that invisible power is one that like, where you're 21 years old, you get $100 million contract, the only Black person, right? Like in the room most of the time. And you're seen as like the person who should be getting coffee. And yet you emerge out of all of that, not the person who's getting people coffee, but the person who's like running a billion-dollar industry. Like, so like that, it strikes me. I don't have a question in there, but it always like, I just always love hearing this story for that reason. And one of the things that like it always takes me to is like, I'd love to hear more about your home life. Like we got a little bit already, but like, what was it like growing up? Like Queens, like we heard the story already in the beginning, but like, what more? Like, what about family life?
Yeah, I think my parents, still around, both kind of like incredible human beings. And they always really did stress, not in like a power hungry kind of way, but the idea that there's nothing that we couldn't do or accomplish. And not like, people say that, but it was very like practical in my house. Like, yeah, of course, we can do anything. There's nothing we can't do. Like, you may have to figure out the information. And they were very good about, before even like, we didn't know about Montessori, but they almost had some Montessori style things of like, my mother would say, if I didn't know something, she would say like, what does not knowing have to do with finding out? Right? This is way pre-Google, hella pre-Google. So like we had our encyclopedia set, which was like paper Google sort of with less of it. And if I need to know something, I had to go find out, or I had to be thoughtful about, oh, well, one time, Aunt Karen, she knows a lot about rivers. I got to call her and ask her questions about my assignment and see if she knows, or I got to see if I can get the librarian to pay attention to me, or if I can get a teacher, or I know that kid is really smart at such and such. So they were very good about honing the capability so I could have the confidence kind of like to be the problem solver for my own life, which I think was really important. My father used to play chess with me all the time. And my mother kind of naturally thinks, I feel like she just naturally thinks like 12 steps ahead. So she's kind of always very much like, we can plant seeds, but if we're going to plant seeds, should we do it for apples? Should we do lemons? And if we're going to do lemons, how much would that be worth? And what we get out of it? So she was always kind of, even when we were young, thinking through like, you can do this action, but how does that action reverberate right in the world, right? And I think those, and it could be very small things, but they were very good about raising us with that. And I think the most important thing was they were both very solution oriented, and they're both brilliant, but they're both very solution oriented, like with hands and feet, right? Like hearts, of course, heart led. They're super smart and they can think through solutions, but it was very natural in our house. And I think it still feels very natural to me now. And I don't know that I really didn't know that it maybe wasn't happening everywhere, like until probably like 30 something. Of like, if somebody had a problem, we were just all, and whatever it was, we heard somebody's hungry, in a graceful way. It was always like, you don't ever like shame somebody or make a person feel away, or like everybody's going to be on hard times. We should be grateful to have the opportunity to serve. Like we should be grateful to have this time and this life. And if we have an opportunity to serve, what a blessing that is. So it was always like, somebody needs something, we're in the car. Oh, somebody's at the hospital, we're physically going to the hospital. Or like somebody's going to the house to look after the kids. It was always immediate and action oriented. And I think I have sometimes good, sometimes bad, a bias for action, which, again, if you use it in the right way, it can be helpful.
Well, very helpful for CEOs for sure, in many different ways. And yeah, like hearing you talk about this, like it sounds a whole lot like we do an exercise often that has to do with like helping people to measure their privilege in relationships. So what types of relationships do I have? Would they be there? Like questions like, do I have a person in my life that I could turn to and call at 3 a.m.? Right. And every time, like when I hear you talk about your family, I hear that sentiment. And there's also another one that's in there, another one of the questions in that set that is, did the people in your life tell you that you could or can be anything, right? And did you get messages about that? And so, yeah, like that resonates a whole lot with like all of that, all the relationships that you have. And your mother, she suffered from MS, right?
My mother suffered from multiple sclerosis. So she went from running like, I don't want to say like a few miles she was very like efficient. She would wake up, like run 3 miles, get us ready for school, go to work, like very like good about her time. Like, and so it was quite challenging to go from that to not being able to walk and having to use a cane and, eventually to a wheelchair. But I think I was also around the same age, like 9 or 10 when they came home and told me about it. And it was a long time coming. I mean, these are things that when I look back, because at the time, multiple sclerosis was not usually diagnosed with a Black woman, it was a very long time before she was diagnosed. Somebody actually literally told her, like, maybe you should see a psychiatrist, or she was having like debilitating pain. And this was like 2 years of going to doctors until they finally, one doctor was like, this is like classic MS, I'm going to put you, we'll get the right test. So when she was diagnosed, the thing that was so, I think, and again, when you're a kid, you don't process it this way, but my mother absolutely just figures things out. And she's also very, like, still very joyful and grateful in any moment. So like, if she couldn't move around the normal way to like hang curtains, like I would walk in the house and she would have figured out how to rig like this chair with this crate to do, like, to tape up the thing that she needs to do. Like, she was always very like, this is not going to stop me, and I will figure out which way I could do it. Like, no matter what, even if I can't feel my arms today and I can only walk on one leg and I can do this, I still am going to be celebratory about the chance to live. I'm still going to, she was still very good about, like, I want to be a wonderful mother. And my house was like the house that the other kids would come by when I wasn't even there. You know what I mean? So I think she was, she was always committed to, and she's still to this day. One of the things, I'm recently celebrating my 15th year anniversary, and my husband says this too. He's like, you're a mother. He's like, I know so many people who are sick and in pain all the time, and I can't even imagine, like, you know what I mean, like what that is like. So that, but she was like, she's so unusual in her kind of vivaciousness for life, and her just like, yeah, we can figure it out. He said he recently asked me, you think she'll want to, if she came down for Halloween, do you think she would want to go in the neighborhood? I'm like, she's down for whatever. She'd be like, yeah, roll me around. We're gonna. I was like, she's like, say yes, yeah. And I think growing up around that kind of energy, and it also really instilled that, and I very much feel this way. You don't know what's gonna happen in the next hour. So I'm very who your partner is. My father, they're such a great partnership. But B, I'm very serious about, like, when I wake up. And like, okay, I turn around, feet hit the ground. I'm like, I'm so gravy at that moment. But like, it could be first 6 minutes. Oh, feet hit the ground. I'm checking, I'm breathing. Yeah. I'm good. Check. I won at life. Everything above that for the rest of the day is just gravy, cherries on the top. And I think coming from that baseline and shift your life view and live the joyful life that we're meant to. Because we're not, like I started the call before anyone joined. You said, how am I doing? I said, I'm having the time of my life. But I really mean it, because if you're not, then we're kind of doing it wrong.
Right. Wow. For more reasons than you can imagine, I appreciate that message deeply and personally. But I'm sure that our audience really appreciates it as well. So let's turn now to, like, you as a leader today. What's it like being a leader at the intersection of at least two identities, woman, Black, maybe others, right, that are not fairly represented in your industry?
I mean, I don't have anything to compare to in my particular experience, but I think the two biggest things are, this is a super thing that's, you'll see a real through line in how much I value time. Yeah. So one of the biggest challenges is people, like, the human brain apparently takes 100,000 years to change in a meaningful way from an evolution standpoint. So everybody has the best of intentions. When I walk in a room, people just have not grown up seeing Black women in leadership roles. It wasn't on their movies, isn't in their TV, it's not in their books, not in the news, it's not in the Fortune 500. It just doesn't really exist. So trying to overcome that kind of being novel stimuli to somebody is a waste of everybody's time, right? Yeah. So, like, because I have to come in the room and I have to actually spend more time and overcoming your mental hurdle of, like, I'm not sure if she's the right person. I'm not sure if she's bringing value. Rest assured, I bring value everywhere I go. I'm good at that. Right? So, but now it's going to take you, I hope, at my best, right? Within the 10, 15 minutes, maybe years, depending on who you are and where you are in your cycle, to be like, oh, okay, now I can understand, I can see. And now you've wasted both my time and your time when we could have been getting to progress. This is the first, like, biggest challenge. I think the second thing is, it could be good or bad. I'm very inspired by this generation's refusal to accept certain problems that I grew up more modifying to the problems and adjusting to the problems. But a lot of times you go into, if you're any underserved or if you're unusual in that environment, you tend to be disproportionately representative of the entire experience, right? So any room I'm in, somebody's like, if they have a bad experience or a good experience with me, they may be like, this is how I view all Black women. That's a real thing.
Yep.
That's a real thing, like, right. And I know some people get very frustrated by it. I've always been like, you know what? I'll take that. But it is an extra responsibility that other people don't have to have of just like, I'm just going to be me. I'm just Tom, or I'm just whomever. And I'm not thinking through my mind of like, damn, I need to really bear the responsibility of this person probably has very limited social interactions. We did, Nick, we know this more like, right, that part of the biggest problem in this country is social segregation. So even again, people don't have to be like in the KKK to just be like, I don't go to black people's houses. I just don't know. It's just kind of the way that America has fallen out. So they meet me, and then in their mind, they're like, no, I know somebody black. And you're almost filling the gap for black people. It's a lot, that's a burden. And you can weigh it one way or the other, but again, it's another hurdle that everybody is not facing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I like how you talk about it in terms of like, it takes so much of your energy, it's just not worth it. So you just show up into the space and just be who you are.
Just be who you are. Yeah. And I think I'm grateful. Like I said, I really do. I'm 47. And I think now seeing the front seat to, I'm like, everyone be like, no, we're going to be all the way who we are, where it's beautiful. And I give a lot of credit to, I worked with Puff for 14 years. And we were, he did a beautiful job of we are small, but let's say it's about 300 people. But you had just a group of hardworking, badass, brilliant minorities who have proven themselves over and over again, commercially and culturally. Yep. And we were unabashed about being in the room saying like, somebody, oh, I'm a $1 billion agency and I recommend this. And we'll be like, well, we're black and we know nobody watches that show. So we're going to go with ours. And I think like that training got us to that for me was almost like Navy SEALs camp of like, yeah, I love it. And I love everybody to be what they are. But what I am is I'm a black woman. I'm gonna lean into that 100 times. And I have certain experiences that you just physically could not have. And I'm gonna respect the experiences you have that I physically couldn't have. But let's start to like have an honest, out loud conversation. And sometimes things get so politically sensitive, you can't speak in truth.
Wow. I'm gonna start calling Puff Yoda. It sounds like Jedi training for Black entrepreneurial excellence.
Truly.
So now like thinking just about the big life, like you do so much, like really like Dia, you should slow down. I just personally here, you should slow down. Because you're going to take up every bit of it. But given all you do, how do you manage to be a successful CEO, an entrepreneur, a mom, a partner, all the other things you are? Like, how are you here now? Like, honestly, like if I were running one company, I'd be like, I don't have time for any of that. Like, how do you do all that?
Well, I really love Thread. I think that so Thread, if I can be useful in any way, I want to be there whenever I can be, one. And then two, again, same thing, is time. Like we've all heard the joke, like we all have the same 24 hours as Beyonce. Like it's true. And I've lived long enough to go back and meet people who have literally been talking about the same thing they're about to do for over 20 years. And I think it's important to, what I try to do is just live a life where you fail fast and you utilize the hell out of your time. People, like I do things like if you use like a calendar management system that defaults to 30 minutes or 60 minutes, I won't do that. I'll default to 15 or 20 minutes. And I try to be economical and efficient with my time and your time, because it is the greatest gift that we have that's actually priceless. So like when we're all cavalier about it and like, oh, we're just going to talk about stuff, or we're going to gossip, which is cool. Sometimes that's fun. And you need to build that time in that space in too. But if you look back over the last 5 years and you kind of have spent it talking in circles or only theory or musing or only negativity, those things happen as part of life. But if you're like, oh, 70% of my time is doing that, then you're kind of like throwing this precious gift of life in the trash. So I think the way I am obnoxious about my schedule. Like I look at, like, I literally like probably stopped talking to my mother early, and I was like, let's talk about Mother's Day. She was like, why are you talking about May? I'm trying to get my time lined up. But it's because I respect time so much that I want to like, let's get the best out of this 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes or days. Mostly because I want to do my work, I want to do the right thing, and spend mad time with my super fun, cute 9-year-old daughter and my husband. That's what life's actually about. So I want to get to that as fast as I can.
Yeah. And when I hear you talk about time in that way, it sounds a lot like your mom too, and
Yeah.
in terms of like that backwards planning and that like, all right, well, we're gonna do this, but if we're gonna do this, then why, right? Like you were building metrics when you were 9, right?
Yeah.
But and that's just, I think that's just incredible. The at one point you said, I think you told me once that because the quintessential question to ask is like, how do you balance your time? You're like, well, balancing is for clowns. Like I don't
Juggling.
balance
Juggling is for clowns.
juggling.
Yes,
That's
yes,
it.
yeah.
Yeah. That's what it is. Juggling's for clowns.
Yes,
And
yes.
then you went on to say something like, whenever you're in whatever room you're in, you're trying to bat 1,000.
Yeah, so
Like,
people will say, how do you juggle it all, right? To your point, balance
yeah,
all. And I was, first of all, I think like the idea of work-life balance is like an illusion, right?
yeah,
Or it's like, you know what I mean? It's like something that you try, you will literally like, and it's not there, and you will fall into nothingness. But I
right.
think like the idea of juggling things around, I do always make the point, clowns juggle. I don't want to be in the circus, right? What I want to try to be is more in a batting cage. And caveat, I'm not actually that athletic, but the mental theory of like, in that moment, I want to do the thing in that moment. I want to be in the park with my daughter. I want to knock that moment. I got to bake organic muffins for the thing. I want to bake the hell out of those muffins. But if I'm in a room negotiating a contract for $100 million, I'm going to be in that room. And
Yep.
and in order to do that, you have to fully accept, I will not be doing a good job at the other thing. I'm not going to be the best mother I can be when I'm negotiating a contract, right? I'm not going to be the best CEO I can be when I'm in the park. That's cool. Because really at no time are you going to be able to, most people, and we're 99.5% of the same, because you all say the same genome, right? Most people are not going to be superior and incredible and excellent at the same time, at the same thing, at the same time. Choose something, kill it, do the next thing.
Yeah. Like very mindful way of approaching your work and your life. Like all in on the one thing that you're doing. So
Yeah.
that's beautiful. Everybody, don't forget to breathe today for your mindfulness exercises. All right. So a little bit of a controversial question. I know you work in maybe controversial, I don't know, but like I know you work in liquor sales.
Yes.
And have done that for quite some time and been incredibly successful with it. And I must say, personally, I remember when Ciroc came on the scene and then turned into a whole thing. And then later to learn that you were the person behind nearly all of that was like, oh, that's why I was hearing about it in all the music, all the things, seeing it everywhere. Thanks, Tia. But anyway, we once had you speaking to a group of Thread students, and one student stepped back and asked you what I thought was going to be a really hard question, and would love to hear your response to it here. The question was, so you work in an industry that preys upon Black people and minority individuals or poor people, right? How do you sleep well at night, or how do you like yourself, right? Being like at the head of all of them.
Yeah, I take it very seriously, the responsibility in the spirits, being in the spirits industry. It's literally the only industry that has a constitutional amendment dedicated to it, right? And it's an industry where the biggest companies have come together and proactively self-regulated to make sure like we have the right things in place. But more importantly, I think it's important that you look at it through the right lens, right? So there's a lot of kind of misnomers that have been successfully spread, and not to get like too political, but we have our own like American propaganda that we have to also realize, right? So the reality is 2022, and no judgment anywhere. I want people to, if they do consume responsibly. But and you look at like popular American ethnic groups, the group that over indexes for drinking is white Americans. It's actually not Black Americans. So it's also one is a fake baseline, right? So let's say, I want you to also drink responsibly. They don't worry, I'll get you some water.
I'm gonna do this, I promise.
So that's the first thing. It's important that you start with the right baseline. I think the second part that's really important is you look at Black Americans consume in proportion to the population, 12 to 14% of like kind of total sales, and 12 to 14% of the population typically, right? So that's actually not skewed. Where the real problem is, and where I think the idea that you feel as if, hey, we're in an industry, we're a part of it, and are we getting treated fairly? That's the right feeling, because it's less than 1% at the C-suite. when you talk about Black women, less than 2% across the board, right? We are grossly underrepresented in this industry that we participate in a meaningful way, not just from a consumption standpoint, but when you talk about, and the example you just gave with Ciroc vodka it is in the novel and innovation piece. So Black Americans and minority communities in general disproportionately lead trends. Right, disproportionately, the next hot thing, the coolest thing, the thing you're willing to try, at least for how things stand in today's where we are in history, is disproportionately coming out of minority communities. So you are kind of, if you will, if you was a weighting, right? Like you're overweighting in terms of being able to move an industry forward, and then these populations don't get the credit for it because we don't have ownership and we don't have representation in the C-suite. Now, what I've tried to do, and actually just one quick point, I'll talk about what we've put in place to kind of accommodate that. One other thing that's really important is when I was working with Puff and we built Ciroc Vodka, we launched a very successful variant, Ciroc Peach. And it's literally like historically unparalleled in how many sales, how fast, how much people loved it. We were doing a tour, like a thank you tour to stores around the country. And we were here, actually where we are today, here in Atlanta. And I walked into a store, and it had never even occurred to me, but the store owner said, this brand has done so well, I've been able to put enough money aside to pay for my daughter's college this year, just off of Ciroc Peach, this one store owner. And both Puff and I were like, we weren't even thinking about how, this things reverberates, right? To be honest, I'm like I said, I'm 47, I never really drank till I was probably in my 30s. But like, this is not so much about drinking alcohol. It's about fair participation in an industry that, because of the historical impediments, women and Black people literally could not participate in. So you have this $353 billion industry where the people who are the most wealthy are primarily private families who are straight up grandchildren of bootleggers, of which we just could not be an economic part of.
Right.
So we have built, me and two other co-founders, an initiative called Pronghorn. Please look it up. We are looking for people to be a part of it. We're hiring all kinds of stuff. And the pronghorn is named after an animal that most people don't know about, but I'm a geek, out of Montana, which is actually the fastest land mammal in America, second fastest land mammal in the whole world. And it can go really fast for a long period of time. So cheetah, number one in the world, if they're at a race, a cheetah will win in a sprint. But if it's it's like a marathon, the pronghorn will win every single time. So when we built Pronghorn, we said, we want to build a template on how to effectively diversify any industry. And we're starting with the spirits community, and we're starting with the Black American community in America. And we have a lot of ground to cover and not a lot of time. So the Pronghorn beautifully represents our mission, because we got to go far, but we got to go fast. And we are driving a $2.4 billion impact in terms of investing in 57 Black-owned spirits brands and driving 1,800 new Black Americans to work from intern to C-suite throughout the industry. And the biggest 13 companies in spirits have all agreed and said, yes, they've all signed up to their commitments and are hiring in accordance with the numbers that we set. And the numbers we set basically get the industry to the right sizing of how many Black people should be working, how many Black people should participate in the economic value, and how many Black people should own brands, which is not the case at all right now.
Wow, that's incredible. Like I've known about this initiative for now, I think going on a year or so. Yeah. And just every time I hear you talk about it, it just becomes like, it becomes more close to what you had been envisioning. And so just to hear like 13 spirits companies are signing on, and like, that's huge. Yeah, incredible. Congrats.
Thank you. Well, it's not, I mean, this is what we have to do. This is what we want to just,
Yeah. I mean, I think that like your point about, first off, getting the data right. And it's really people that look like me that overconsume, not necessarily people who don't. And at the same point, in terms of like who is, how often are Black people participating in the industry, but yet represented in terms of like receiving dollars from it, is way disproportional. So I applaud you for finding that, knowing it, and like going and doing something about it. So I told you, everybody, general badass. All right. Let's try this one on for size. What has been the most challenging moment of your career so far?
I would say to the earlier question, when I have always, not always, but probably now for about 19 years, I have not worked and lived in the same state. And it
Mm.
was, so I've always flown back and forth every week, and never really was a big deal until we had our daughter. So I remember very distinctly being at home, having my daughter, staying home for a little while, but then having to go on my very first trip to New York from, at the time, living in Atlanta. And I was like, my poor driver was like, I was like in the car, like sobbing. I'm like, this is terrible, because it's such a hard. And I was like, I'm not doing this. I'm going to be a strawberry farmer. Bump this.
Strawberry farmer. That would be great.
I know I do. I still want to do that. But it was. I think we all are facing these kind of things in our lives, right? With our parents and our loved ones and children in general. And you feel like it's these series of choices, and are you making the right choices? So it was definitely a heart-wrenching moment of like, is this the right thing to be doing?
Yeah, choice points are hard. And when you have them enough, you go back and look at them. It can sometimes be really torturous. Do you go back and look at your choice points and be like, what?
I don't, because I feel that I say this a lot, like, to give the dress example, if you don't wear dresses, but I'm always like, nobody knows the dress you didn't wear. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you sit in your closet and you pick something and you go out, and no one's like, she should have worn the black jumpsuit. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you pick the thing, and actually this is against, Harvard has said this is wrong, but I still believe in this. My thing is always like, make a decision and make it the right decision. And the truth is, it's funny about childhood. I used to read every single choose your own adventure book as a kid. So like, you could, I don't know if anybody knows about this, you read it, you can pick the different series of choices, and then you can see all the different choices. Very nice. You can see like, oh, this happened, and it's kind of like, butterfly effect for kids, right? But that's not real. I don't have that option real. So there is nothing to compare to what the option would be. So there is actually so little fruit in living in a retrospective. It's a theory. It doesn't, I'm a big person of like, very Winnie the Pooh of like, there literally is only one day. To a certain extent, tomorrow and yesterday are constructs that we don't know about because we've never been. So I don't want to spend my time in a fake thing.
Wow. Let the future be written as you write it. Yeah. That's gorgeous. The choose your own adventure books were a personal favorite of mine. But now I'm thinking I might have done them wrong. I wanted to read them all. I wanted to do all the different combinations I could. So I would like read them and reread them and reread them.
No, me too. I think that's right. I think that's what you're supposed to
do. That's cool. All right. So let's get on to like future female entrepreneurs. You're one of them, or you're a current female entrepreneur. What advice do you have for them?
This is another like big misnomer. There's a study came out in Women's Psychology Today, I think it is this year, where women are generally perceived as being more risk averse than men.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because when you actually take the time to do retrospective how those questions are asked, it'll be like, do you ride a motorcycle? Well, maybe more men do that. But if you actually ask, were you a cheerleader, which is pretty physically dangerous as well. You know what I mean? Like, and there's something, right? Or do you hike, or do you go climbing, or do you run? Like those things, they never get asked that way. So it's not, I don't think it's exactly accurate, but what is accurate is women have more consequences for taking risk. So you work at a place and you're like, I'm going with my gut. Let's go with the blue one. If it goes wrong, that woman's probably out of there, right? You know what I'm saying? It's not like, oh, he's a visionary, let him fail again, right? It's not, women don't have the same freedom to take risks. I think that fear disproportionately has affected women from choosing entrepreneurship as a path. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm going to tell you some stats, and these are just for Black Americans, but I suspect they apply for more. I need to find this out. But it's an interesting stat where the average white American is worth 13 times the average Black American in America. But this is good news actually. If you extract the group that owns anything, they don't have to own Amazon, they just own their business owners of something, that multiple drops to a 3x differential today with all the systemic inequities. That's kind of super good news. And when you think about like, how am I going to fix the world? What are we going to do with diversity? It's like, well, here's it. Let's get more entrepreneurship and ownership. That we already have we didn't even try to have this experiment. We have the results. Let's double down on that. Interesting, even more interesting, that subset, when you double click, the average Black American who owns anything at all, nail salon, some stock, something, is typically worth 12 times what the average Black American who owns nothing at all. So when you think to yourself, oh, it's much more safer for me to work here at Procter & Gamble or for the Metro, Nah, if you just do the math, it's actually more risky to depend on a cold institution who has no loyalty to you than to depend on yourself, of whom your fate is inextricably tied to yourself. Right? So like, remove the risk, understand what you want to do. If you want to do it, it's not for everybody. And by the way, you can function, I think, as a very great entrepreneur within an organization. And there's a lot you can learn in those places. But if you decide to be an entrepreneur, I think don't spend years thinking about like, I have to get it perfect, I need to know everything. No, jump in and learn, and you probably know more than you could already imagine. As I said earlier, and I say this quite a bit, all humans share 99.5% the same genome. So the capacity for abundance is pretty equivalent in all of us. And I've worked with some superstars. I've been around royalty. I don't know if I played basketball for 20 years, if I could take on LeBron. Maybe he's in the 0.5, but all the rest of us, like, you can do it. Like, it doesn't have to be perfect. You just have to keep going. And then really, if you view it like a scientist, you need to go so you can fail as fast as you can, learn and keep going.
Right. Yeah, exactly. You keep like in Thread, we call it failing forward, right? Fail fast, fail forward, like learn from everything that is going to accept the small wins that lead you towards the big wins, right? Yeah. And you just keep working towards those. I'm going to go back to something you said a minute ago, intrapreneur. What's that?
Opportunities for you to, so I'll give you a personal example. So when I worked for Puff, I started as executive assistant. And then I grew to be his chief of staff. When I was his chief of staff, working for him as an employee, he started to have this conversation with a company called Diageo, who's the biggest spirits company in the world. And I went and said, hey, I want to be a part of the negotiation. Back to my old job. You may not know this, but remember, I trained in negotiations. So I want to be a part of the negotiation team for this opportunity with Ciroc Vodka. Yep. So, okay, sure, come on in. So as we finished as negotiations got closer to finishing, I said, look, we're about to be done, but your whole vibe has been built on your branding and your marketing, Salvo Fan. We no longer have an internal dedicated marketing agency like you're used to. I want to rebuild it. I will get it funded. I want to participate in what I do, right? But I'm going to build a team. Here's what I think we should hire. And I want to work on this every day. He said, okay, you do that, you replace yourself in your current job as chief of staff, and you can go start this internal ad agency. So essentially, I was working within the confines of the company, but I had the ability to use and leverage, like, well, I'm with this company, and then go out and rate and get the dollars to actually start this company, of which now I could participate in like an owner, but have the safety being inside the building. A lot of those opportunities exist in your organizations if you figure out like, hey, this is missing, this is a problem that needs to be solved. And honestly, I had this conversation this morning with a woman who was on loan to Pronghorn from another company. And she said, well, I want to start my own company. Well, most of the time for consultants, your first client, if you're good at it, is the company you just left. And we're like, okay, well, we want to support you. When are you doing? We want to go, and we will let us know, let's get your rates, and we want to support you. So there's something you're uniquely qualified to do with your current organization. Potentially they could be your first client.
They could be the first client. Wow.
Yeah.
I love that. I'm going to remind everybody, we have about 13 minutes left, and we're going to be moving to questions in just a couple of seconds after a couple more questions from Dia, after Dia answers a few more. We have about 3 or 4 questions already in queue. Feel free to use Q&A to put them in, and we'll get to them as time permits. All right, here we go. What are you most proud of?
Oh, I mean, cliche answer, but definitely my family. My daughter, I went to, by the way, really proud. I went to parent teacher conference yesterday. They were like, it's beautiful, like great, all great notes. They were like, her brain's so fast, she's so happy. So that's the hardest, it's the biggest responsibility in the world, to feel like you're going to be responsible for somebody's, like, for their, like, who they are, like, and of course some things are, you can't control everything, but she's only 9, but so far so good.
Yeah, my daughter's turning 8 next week, and it's like this age, like 8, 9, 7, 8, 9, like, is just, they're capable of understanding everything in the world now, and they're capable of doing almost anything, and they're just not there yet. But you see them like developing their own like philosophy, and like this is a fun part of parenting and a challenging part of parenting.
Yes, and amazing. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah. Oh wow. All right. It's good to know that she's doing well down there in the transition to Atlanta. I'm sure that can be challenging.
Yeah.
But yeah, we talked a little bit about Pronghorn. Is that what's on the horizon, or is there anything else that's on the horizon?
I mean, we're living in an incredible time where so much change and, so much, forgive my language, but it's kind of like this macro fuckery, right?
I'm going to use that.
And you could be very overwhelmed by being like, oh my God, how can I help education or disease or justice or voting right or whatever? It's a lot. So again, we try to kind of pick a lane and say, well, you know what? Movements need money, right? So like, what is the economic underpinning of this? And also, how can we help take everybody's good intentions? We got a lot. I've gotten personally a lot of calls from people who run huge companies. I'm like, I want to do the right thing. I don't know what to do. Yeah. So I'm particularly proud about Pronghorns. I'm just trying to simplify, build a case study that you can lift and repeat. And we're starting with spirits and we're in our first year, but we have already gotten calls from major sports and major music and major tech of being like, do you think you could do Pronghorn tech? Do you think you could do Pronghorn music? And so I feel like, yeah, that for me is next of saying like, how do we systemize this to the benefit of this country and the benefit of our GDP? We all know diversity is just straight up good for business. So yeah. I love the ability to have the win-win of like, hey, let's all participate in the industries. These industries should reflect the consumers they serve. And it's good for America, if you're doing it right.
I love it. Really well put. And final question from me, and then we're going to jump to the audience. Would you rather work with Puff or LeBron?
Oh, that's a trap. That's a trap. I'm very grateful to have worked with both of them. And
I get it. I get it.
I'm very good to work with both of them. And they both have a common thread, I think, of such a commitment to the impossible. Like they're very much like, we can, and they literally have shown that they can accomplish any and all things, which is no better inspiration. Like I'm going to be like, oh, I don't want to practice. Like, you can't, what am I going to say? It's LeBron. Like, okay, I'm on it. I'm selling tequila.
Okay, I got it. Oh,
it's
man.
Very inspiring.
That's awesome. I hope that, are Kid and Play going to be in the new House Party movie? No?
I haven't watched it. I need to buy it.
Right,
I need to watch it. Yeah.
I was only going to ask because if you get a chance to like then go back and be like, hey, my journey started. Watch it.
Nice full. I actually have not said that out loud till just now. Like made the like round connection. So yes, that is a good point.
You got it. You're 1 degree removed. All right. So let's jump over to some questions that we have from the audience. We've got a few here ready to go. So. Yatunde is asking, you're lucky to have a close family bond that provided you with the socio-emotional support you needed to build your self-efficacy, self-awareness, and positive self-development to excel in life. That's beautiful. You should sit with that. What is your advice to children who are not fortunate to have such a positive bond?
Yeah, I understand that. And I think it's real. The first thing is like the conscious acceptance of it, right? Like the really conscious acceptance of like, hey, I probably wasn't given all the tools that I needed. And at such a formative time, it's very difficult. You can't actually re-raise yourself, right? Because there's just a period of time so like, I think the full acceptance and then the full responsibility for how you can do your very best to move forward. And the grace to yourself of like, yeah, you know what? There are certain things I didn't get. Right? Like an understanding and being graceful and being gentle to yourself of realizing like, okay, let me accept it. Let me try to get I'd almost like, we call it kind of like white papering it. Like, how am I resetting? What can I reset myself? Right? You know what I mean? Like, how am I sitting down with myself, really understanding like how incredible I am that I am where I am today from whatever the backdrop was, really accepting, there's nothing wrong with really accepting the power that you have to have, potentially, depending upon what is, maybe even survive certain things. And we've all survived things in our own way. And then two, I think this, we're getting much better with this. I'm a big advocate of like, get it there. You need sometimes external people, even the very simple, silly thing I just said, saying things out loud makes a difference. It just really does. So like, you're always in your own mind trying to solve things. You need sometimes an independent professional person who can walk you through the journey so you can say the words out loud, hear how they sound, so you can understand how powerful you are to be like, I've chosen to see that I didn't have the tools to begin with, but I'm ready to form my own tools, right, to move forward, which is a beautiful thing.
I love that. Yeah, I personally appreciate that a lot. So thank you. Sarah is asking, it sounds like you have already accomplished a lot in your career. Where would you want to be in 10 years from now?
I would want to I'd want to semi-retire. I probably always want to be involved in, I'm going to always want to be involved in Pronghorn, and I'm going to always want to be involved in things that I can do in representative government. Like, I really am old school and old fashioned, the fact that I love this country and it frightens me the way it's going. Anything I can do for this time to like say, hey, you know, to move away from the divisiveness, I would want to do for as long as I lived. But I definitely don't want to work at the capacity and the time that I do now in 10 years. I would like to be on a beach and playing Scrabble and doing samba or something. Like, just doing more fun, lighthearted things.
All right. I like the alliteration of samba and Scrabble. That's going to be good.
I love alliteration.
Yeah, wonderful. Great. So, question from class. What do you do when your schedule goes awry or something's just off? Like, not what you planned. What do you do then?
It probably seems at odds, but I'm actually pretty adaptable. Like, so like I'm good about, and in some ways it goes back to what I talked about earlier, like, because when I was coming up, like, systems were rigid, so I was adaptable, right? So like things change all the time. If you don't know, give him I don't know if you know about Puff at all, but working for Puff Daddy on any given day, he's extremely fast. And we had, when I was Puff Chief of Staff, I could literally in one day, in 20 hours, like plan a birthday party for the twins, work on a licensee deal for Sean John clothing that might have been worth $25 million, make sure the jet had applesauce, like hire 6 people, right? Fire somebody, like be on set for making the band, right? Do the pre-calls for Bad Boys of Comedy. So I'm very accustomed to having to shift in a second. So I'm not a person who's like, you changed my schedule now. Like, I'm pretty adaptable to whatever happens in a moment.
Okay. So any one of those things that you just said, including applesauce on a jet, I probably would have had to think about for like a day before I made the decision about what to do. So I am happy that there's people like you, Dia, in my life. All right. So final question that we have, unless another one comes in, hint, hint, if anybody has another question, please put it in Q&A. What books are your favorite and what are you currently reading?
We're talking Baltimore. So, and this is my dear friend and you know, gubernatorial candidate. But I love the book. I do really love the book, The Other Westmore. And it's honestly a real life example of, I don't want to simplify this, but it's on the same theme of what I was talking about choose your own adventure. It's about choices. So it's a dear friend of mine, but I also really love objectively the text and the ability to look at like the social impact, especially the way if you're not familiar with the book, these 2 young men have the same name, they live in the same neighborhood. His mother was widowed and the other Westmore's mother was single. And his real point is like, each of our journeys could have been the other journey, right? So the other Westmore is today in prison for kind of a robbery gone wrong and the loss of the life of a police officer. And Westmore, my dear friend, is now a gubernatorial candidate for the state of Maryland. And it's not some like, I made the choice. It's very much like, I could have just as easily been in his situation and he could have just as easily been in mine. And it talks about the fragility of the choices that we make. And it's kind of the same thing I've been saying about like, we're all very much the same, right? In the capacity for excellence, but the capacity for going the other direction, all is within us, right? And that's why we have to be so intentional and conscious about this gift of life. Wow. And what am I reading now? Emails. Yeah. I'm not reading anything. I did read. Wait, I have it right here. This is not like this is just like a book.
Hey, no. Stop the prejudging. Stop the prejudging. Come on. What is it? Let's see it.
Don't judge me. Stuart Woods. So this is like, I don't know if anybody, I don't know if you guys, this is probably from like an old time, but he does like, they're like detective, like cop books, I guess. He's like a rich cop. He's not a cop, but it's kind of that thing. It's fun. They're fun. Hey, fun books.
You read what you like.
Read what I like. That's right.
I love it. The answer at emails is always true for me. So,
yes.
Well, Dia, this has been incredible. I appreciate so much that you spent the last hour with us and all of our attendees. And it's just always wonderful, not just to hear your story, but also to like share it with such a large audience of people, and just give everybody else an opportunity to see, you know, how excellent you really are. And thank you. Like,
thank you, Nick, so much. And thank you. I'm always so appreciative that all the Thread does. And I love Baltimore. I love Maryland, and I'll be up there soon. And anytime I can be helpful, I'm please tag me in.
Listen, if you're in town, you need a place to stay. I got you. It was all good.
I'll drop my daughter off. Enjoy.
Yeah, exactly. That's perfect. Hey, listen, her and B will have a blast. So for our audience, thank you for joining us tonight at the Thread Speaker Series. We hope you enjoyed this discussion, and that you'll join us for our first and only in-person event of this series at the Church of the Redeemer on Wednesday, November 2nd. Everybody, that's next Wednesday. That's 1 week from today, 6 days. Some people might say 7, but I'm going to call it 6, for a discussion with current and former Baltimore Health Commissioners, Dr. Letitia Zaraza, and Dr. Joshua Sharfstein. To register and view more upcoming speakers, visit thread.events/speakers. Thank you, everyone. And we will see you hopefully in person at Church of the Redeemer next week. Dia, one last time, thank you so much. We will talk to you next time.